What's the tallest building you've ever been in? One of the Twin Towers before they went down in New York. Sears Tower, which now I guess is called the Willis Tower in Chicago. Buildings like that. Been up on the CN Tower, although that's different. Talking about an actual building with living space, office space, those kinds of things inside. Well, very shortly, no matter where you've been, you will not have been in the tallest building in the world. Unless you go to Saudi Arabia, specifically to Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, and go to the top of the building they are building now, the world's first kilometer-high tower is being built. How high could you go? Joining me now, Richard Witt, Principal of Quadrangle Architects, Chair of the Council on Tall Buildings. Hi, Richard.
Hi there, good morning.
The Council on Tall Buildings, I have to tell you, I did not know existed.
Well, I should say I'm not the chair of the Council on Tall Buildings. I'm the chair of the Canadian chapter of the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat, which is based in Chicago.
Okay. So this will no doubt be the tallest building in the world when they get it done.
Yeah, it definitely will be. The Burj Khalifa is 828 meters, so it's going to be about 170 meters higher than that.
All right. So is that getting to the point of unmanageable, or is there any distance you couldn't reach?
Well, I think I don't think it is unmanageable to go higher. I don't know if we could build 20 kilometers high, but we certainly could go higher than a kilometer if we really wanted to. The question is not can we do it technically, but can we do it economically? How long does it take to build that? How much money do you need to front to build it? Because you don't have any payoff. Toronto's a very conservative city in that way, and our buildings tend to be a lot smaller because we don't have tenants that can occupy that much space in a single building. Plus, we don't have the financial aptitude for investing in such a long-term payback.
Yeah. Well, on the other hand, we're building all of these condo buildings, Richard, and perhaps we could have had fewer buildings and just gone higher.
Yes, potentially we could, but that's, particularly with the residential format of buildings, that's even a different formula because most of the money that goes into paying for that is fronted in the beginning by the developer, and they are keen to sell enough to get the money back to them to move to the next stage of it. So if it's a 60-story tower compared to a 30-story tower, there's a much bigger wait until they can attain those sales. Yeah,
I'm talking to Richard Witt about the fact that they're building a 1-kilometer-high building in Saudi Arabia and the possibilities here. How long is it going to take them to build this thing?
I think it's about 4 or 5 years to build it. But one thing that I was just talking about this with somebody else this morning. Most people don't realize that that tower, the same as the Burj Khalifa, is actually part of a much bigger development. So it's not just an object which is delivered. It's the centerpiece of a large master plan. So it's all started in the beginning. Then the amount of time that it takes to build that tall building, they've in the meantime built all of the other buildings all around it. So it's the sort of the jewel in the crown.
So there isn't a point at which you get a building so tall that some sort of sway or something just makes it impractical physically?
Well, as the building would get taller, you'd need to make it wider. So those are definitely considerations. And one of the reasons why in Toronto we don't tend to see, recently we have, but until recently we don't see that many buildings taller than 40 stories, is because the loads which are required because of the wind start to take over from the loads which reinforce the structure because of the earthquakes. So once you get to about 42, 43 stories, the whole structural system has to change to become much more complicated. And this is why we see buildings jump from 43 to 60 stories, because that's when the increased cost of structure starts to become, worthwhile and make it reasonable.
Oh, you have to make a jump. Like you wouldn't say we're at 43, we'll go to 44 or 45. It's
no.
You either jump up to 60 plus or don't bother.
Yeah. I mean, there's some tolerances in there, but in general terms, yes, because what the building is doing at 43 stories is just gravity loads and its stiffness. So you make the structure just be stiff enough to withstand the loads. But beyond about 43 stories, residential stories, that is, it starts to to need different kind of dampening systems. So you'll see buildings like One King West have a water damper at the top, which stops the sway from moving. Another colleague of mine on the Council on Tall Buildings has also developed, in conjunction with some other engineers, a patent for a viscosity damper. So it's a different kind of system that uses kind of like glue in simple terms to compensate for the sway of the building.
Well, you're quoted in a report by the Globe and Mail saying that it is actually possible to build a 20-kilometer tower, but it would take 100 years, and nobody's going to do that.
Well, what I was saying was, I mean, that was a bit tongue-in-cheek, was I don't know, maybe we will do that in the future, but what I was saying was it's not the technical aspects of building which stop us from building tall. It's the economic aspects which are stopping us from building this high. So in places like Saudi Arabia or in the UAE, where there is a central point of power which has a vast amount of resources, they can use their own money to push this forward. Whereas in Canada, we don't tend to have people with that kind of objective. So people who can afford to front $1 billion for one building.
All right, but there's also perhaps in some countries, Saudi Arabia, maybe I think Malaysia, there was a huge building built. Sometimes those countries will get behind doing it simply as a statement to the world.
Yeah, and there definitely is that statement. It's there's a part of a statement which says we're doing this because we want to be the best. There's also the big master plan and the catalyst for a development which is used. And I don't observe in Canadian culture that we have that kind of heroic aspiration.
No, this building, the Kingdom Tower, they're calling it in Saudi Arabia, 12 escalators, 59 elevators, and the elevators have to travel 10 meters per second. Otherwise, it just takes too darn long to get to the top.
Yeah, that's right. And that's one of the other points I was making to Tara Perkins at the Globe as well, is that the technical aspects of the building, she was asking me about, what are we building it out of? Is it some new material? And I said, no, it's not new materials. It's still just concrete and steel, used in kind of more advanced ways than we used to use them, perhaps, with different mixtures in them to make the concrete stronger. But we're not building it out of anything outrageous. What's actually causing a bigger limit is the vertical transportation, which is one of the key aspects of any tall building that needs to be solved. So things like some of the newer systems are destination call elevators, where when you enter, it knows which floor you want to go to because you push a button and then groups people together, or double-decker elevators or high-speed elevators. There's even discussions about maglev elevators, so they're traveling up and then they'll move out of the way to allow another elevator to go past. So because the space for the elevator takes up so much of the floor plate that you really want to reduce it. So by stacking them all in different complicated systems of getting up the building, you're able to not use up the whole tower.
It's like Willy Wonka's factory.
A little bit like that. The problem is...
Hold on 1 second, okay? I got to check traffic, and we'll be back with you in a second. I'm talking to Richard Witt. He's the principal at Quadrangle Architects, chair of the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat's Canadian chapter. And we're talking as a result of the news that in Saudi Arabia, they are building the world's first kilometer-high tower. And Richard, we were talking about getting people up and down, and you talked about an elevator that could go up and then it could move over and get out of the way. I think you said maglift. It's operating off magnets, not wires, right?
Yeah, maglevs, like in Shanghai, they have a maglev train, so it uses the what do you call it, the way that magnets sort of reject each other to kind of draw and attract, so you use by moving. What I was going to say is that they've done all kinds of tests with the elevators so they can go up, go sideways, but people don't respond very well to being in an elevator that goes sideways.
They don't
tend to fall over. so going up is working, but they're going at very high speed. So 10 meters a second is that's how much you accelerate by gravity.
Oh, I see. So wow. But when the elevator goes sideways, they actually fall over?
Yeah, you would. Imagine if you were like when you go up and down, your body's accustomed to going up and down, but if the thing starts to move sideways, you fall over. So those experiments didn't go very far, but having the use of elevators which can move out of the way and allow other elevators to pass is a useful mechanism in creating an economy of elevator shafts. So sometimes you'll have them go 10 stories and then you have to get out and take another one.
Sure.
But there's all kinds of sort of advanced systems in vertical transportation.
Well, it was vertical transportation, the elevator, that allowed us to make the first tall buildings anyway, because nobody was going to carry their groceries 17 stories.
That's right, yes, it was in the, I think, 1890s, in Chicago was the first one, Mr. Otis.
Otis elevator goes back to the 1800s?
Yeah, late 1800s.
Yeah, but
that's
still.
when we first started getting the tall buildings I'm pretty sure it was in Chicago.
Well, what did they call a tall building back then?
I don't know, tall building. I don't know if it was I don't know when the word skyscraper came up. I'm not sure if it was right then. But
yeah, but back then, I think anything above 4 or 5 stories was starting to get pretty big.
Yes, it was, and it's funny we're having a lot of discussions. This is a completely different subject, but in terms of the wood being allowed to build buildings taller than 4 stories in the province, and it turns out that the reason that we can only build 4 stories out of timber is because when that rule was invented, that's as far as fire hoses could reach.
Oh, so it wasn't that you can't build taller with wood.
Oh, no, you can build much higher wood. Moving back to the skyscraper discussion, there's proposals for 30-story wood towers, and there's some 10-story ones being built in London, Australia. There's going to be some coming soon, actually, in Canada as well.
Why would they do that? Isn't it more of a fire risk?
No, it's not if it's protected. I mean, steel is also protected with, steel will melt, as we saw in the World Trade Center as well, if it gets hot. So it just comes down to protection. And most of the old old factory buildings in Toronto especially are built out of heavy timber as well. So if you build it properly, then it's no more of a risk than other things.
In our lifetime, you and me, would we see a kilometer-tall building in Canada?
No.
No? That's disappointing.
I don't think so. I don't think the appetite's there. I mean, the first Canadian place is the tallest building in Canada at the moment, which I can't remember how tall that is exactly. It's 78 stories, I think, but 78 office stories, which is bigger than a residential. But that's been the tallest building in Canada since the 70s. So it's something like 320 meters. So it's not exactly that, but we're definitely not likely to see. In the past 40 years, we haven't seen a jump above that, so we're not going to, I don't believe, see a jump in 3 times that within our lifetime. Yeah,
we may, in a relatively short time, see somebody decide to build one that's just a little bit bigger just to do it, but you're probably right. It's good to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you very much.
Richard Witt, principal of Quadrangle Architects, the chair of the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat's Canadian chapter. And apparently, if you want to be a part of the Mile High Building Club, you're going to have to go to Saudi Arabia once they get it built. This is In-Depth Radio, News Talk 1010.